Hi, good morning, all. Let's continue our first module. So, I told you about the rise of critical theories and how these theories challenged the age old notion of liberal humanism. This paradigm shift, or the great shift in literary studies, occurred in the 1960s, to be more precise. It had three powerful ingredients. They might be labeled as the linguistic turn, the cultural turn, and the critical turn. I will try to give you an idea of these three turns or the three shifts that happened in the way to critical studies or critical in literary studies. Linguistic turn can be defined as a change in the emphasis of the importance of language in meaning making. I have given you some ideas regarding some of the changes that came into the concept of language or in the language study itself by the contributions of the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. But this phrase linguistic turn was coined by an Austrian-born American philosopher named Gustav Bergman. Also, another American philosopher, Richard Rorty, published a book named The Linguistic Turn in 1967. Really, this phrase, that is the linguistic turn, caused increased attention on language and the philosophy of language. So when you study structuralism and post-structuralism, you will study more about the contributions of linguists like Ferdinand de Saussure. So I'm not going into detail what revolutions they made in the study of language. So in literature also, language is used. So the linguistic turn caused a focus on the language of the text, marking a major shift from the liberal humanist notion of the universality and the originality of the text. Generally, liberal humanism tells you to view a text as eternal or a text as meant for all ages, all periods. A text as giving out a stable, definite meaning. But all these ideas were really taken back. Instead, a text becomes open-ended. The meaning shifts from one reading to another reading. Anyway, we don't have to go into much detail about that. You will study about it when you study other literary theories. So a setback happened in the concept of the universal or the universality and the originality of the text. Nothing is original, nothing is universal. No text is universal or original. That's what the literary theorists now say. Then it is primarily it was Saussure's linguistic concepts that influenced, that really greatly influenced the linguistic turn, both in philosophy and literary studies. He formulated the language as a study of science, S-I-G-N-S, a science of science called semiology. But later theoreticians use another term, semiotics. What he did was he firmly articulated, Saussure emphatically articulated the arbitrary nature of language. What is the arbitrariness of language? You might have studied that when you studied language and linguistics. The word and the meaning, they only have an arbitrary relationship. Why should you call a cat a cat? Is there any innate or inherent connection between that cat and the catness? No. It was just the word was conventionally used and it was attributed to that animal. So when we utter the word cat, the image or the visual of the cat comes into our mind. We usually say that if the cat has been named as elephant earlier on, if we call or if we use the word elephant, then the visual of the cat would have come in our mind. So this has far-reaching consequences in establishing that the language is a slippery mode of communication. Anyway, we don't have to go much deeper into that in this context. Then in the 1970s, the new left thinkers focused on culture and its meaning-making processes. Literature is a limb of culture. It is an artifact of culture. Generally, it reflects the interests of the dominant class in society. But cultural criticism goes against the divisions like high culture and popular culture, or great literature and popular literature, that is literature of the masses. So there was an emphasis on reading a literary text to gain some insights into the cultural aspects. So this was that decade, that 1970s decade, was considered to be a turning point in the relationship between literary studies and culture in general. Then the word critical turn. Critical turn denotes the rise of theory. So many terms are used and there is much overlapping. The idea is almost the same. So it comprises of Marxist theories, gender studies, race theory, post-structuralism, post-colonialism, feminism, queer studies, etc. So all these come under the purview of literary studies. Well, I told you how so much of adaptations and borrowings took place from different or diverse fields of disciplines. So most of the above theories, what I mentioned here, feminism, race theory, gender studies, most of these theories critique the existing power relations and stand up for the liberation of the marginalized human beings. Usually they make use of literary studies as a vehicle or as a tool to propagate or to highlight the plight of the ordinary people, the culture of the masses, the class divisions, etc. So beginning from the 1960s itself, all these theories, I told you about the paradigm shift. So all the established new theories altered our vision, our understanding and practices in the study of humanities and social sciences. So this is what I have to say about this paradigm shift, and we have, I think, we have completed the topic here. But subsequently, we have to go to the text. I have codified what is given in the text. Usually, could say more about it, but I have confined myself to the things, to the matters discussed in the text. But I have left out one thing, page 13. I think you have the text with you. You should have the text. In page 13, the salient features or the tenets of liberal humanism are catalogued. So this is taken from a very important book called Beginning Theory, which discusses the basic concepts regarding the theories by Peter Barry. I mentioned that name earlier on. So I think there are 10 or 13 ideas, 10 ideas given in the text. These are the ideas which I have already discussed, but since it is given in the text, so we have to consider it as important. If a question asks, what are Peter Barry's ideas on liberal humanism, then you have to catalogue some of these. So if you turn to page 13, you find numbers given there. Number 1, liberal humanism holds that good literature is of timeless significance and transcends the limitations and peculiarities of the age it was written in. I told you about liberal humanism, which held sway for centuries. So they consider good literature as of timeless significance. It transcends the period in which it is written and transcends the limitations and peculiarities of the age, that is suited for all ages. It has timeless significance. That's why when we study a Shakespearean play that is written in the 16th century, liberal humanists say that it is that wisdom that is given inside the text is still applicable to the to the problems confronting society even now. But as you know, theorists do not believe that. Almost all the theories say that a book is written for that age because the writer is rooted in that age and it is suitable only for a temporary time. That means it loses its significance when it is taken from that context and placed in a 21st century context. Anyway, then the second one is the literary text has its own absolute meaning. and defies all socio-political, historical, and autobiographical contextualization. The liberal humanists negated all the context necessary for the understanding of literature or the appreciation of literature. They said the text itself is an autotelic text, a text which is absolute in its meaning, which gives out a single, fixed, determinate meaning, and that meaning is not going to change at all. And they don't believe in the other context in which the literary text can be placed, the socio-economic conditions of the time and the historical period in which it is written, or the autobiography or the intention of the writer. Nothing, no such extraneous, they call it as extraneous things, matters, which do not affect the text at all. And that gave rise to a movement called New Criticism. You'll study about it later. You're going to study about the different theories that emerged one by one in this literary theory paper. And the first module serves as an introduction to it. So, no absolute meaning, no determinate meaning, no fixed meaning, no stable meaning in a text. And it can be read to get different meanings when it is placed in different contexts. That is what the theorists say. Then third one, to understand the text, it should be studied in isolation. Just overlapping with the second one, detached from its above said context. So if you want to critique a text or to understand, analyze and interpret the text, it should be studied in isolation without touching upon the biography of the author, without touching on the intention of the author or any other context. Nothing is needed, only the text, the black marks printed on the white page is enough to evaluate or to assess and to find out the meaning. I told you how the theorists differ in this aspect. Then the third one is to understand the text, it should be studied in isolation. Okay, that's what I discussed now. And fourth one, human nature is essentially permanent and unchanging. Hence, good literature should reflect this eternal nature only. The concept, the philosophy of the liberal humanists regarding human beings and how they find a human being. They find a human being with essences, with good essences or bad essences. A person is made out of essences. It might be good and he remains good forever. If he is made of bad essences, he's he's bad throughout his life. Will that happen? No, they consider human nature as essentially permanent and unchanging. So this is also reflected in literary characters or in the protagonists of a play or a novel. There is always a fight between good and evil, the hero and the villain. Why this happens? Throughout his life he remains a good person, and throughout in the other one's life he remains a villain. Is it the truth? Theorists say that even one's identity, one's individuality is temporal. A good person sometimes in the next moment can behave in a very evil-minded fashion. So it is the moment that creates the person. He need not be good always. Likewise, a bad person, he need not be bad throughout his life. And you find protagonists branded as, labeled as good and evil, and the fight between the good and the evil. So this is reflected in literary texts. So good works of literature always emphasize this eternal nature of human beings. That's what the liberal humanists believed. These are the tenets of liberal humanism that I am cataloging, which has been given in the text by Peter Barry. And the fifth one, the individual or the subject in literature cannot be portrayed as undergoing change because the true human essence is unchangeable and transcends all influences. The same thing which I discussed in number 4. So even in literature, you find the protagonists, even the theme centering around something which suggests that human nature is unchangeable and it goes above all influences. I told you, to the liberal humans, a human being is always autonomous, self-sufficient. I told you all the characteristics at that time. So man is the supreme being that was being floated around by the liberal humanists. Then form and content are indivisible organic parts of the work of literature. This can be taken as a positive one. Form and content are indivisible. Usually we give more importance to the content. When you read a text, we try to find out what is the meaning of it. But liberal humanism stresses more on the formal aspects of literature. Not only the content, but even through understanding more about the form, you can get at the content, get at the meaning of it. So they give equal importance to form and content. And then seventh one, the purpose of literature should be the reflection of human values, but should not be propagandist. That's also held, this point also is held high by so many, even now. So human values should be reflected through literature. Good values should be the message. So there is always a didactic purpose in writing a literary text. There should be a didactic element, or that the text should give a message. But it should not go down the level of a propaganda. What is propagandist literature? If you want to propagate some ideas, means a political idea, one thing that critics usually find fault with the early Marxist writings is the propagandist element in literature. They try to spread the political ideas, Marxian ideas, through, or it was through a propaganda that is being disseminated or spread to the readers. And the communist countries in the early times usually did that. And those who did not comply with that were really sent out of the country, and many took political asylum in other countries elsewhere. So propagandist literature, it ceases to be literature when you give too much value to the propaganda. So they also said, the liberal humanists believe that literature should not be propagandist. Then the eighth one, the sincerity of the author or the work in furthering human values should not be explicit. It should be inherent and latent in the language of the work. So how you should spread human values, good messages to the readers? It should be concealed in the text. It should be hidden in the text. There are gems of wisdom hidden in the text. So the artist or the writer should be should have so much of talents that he hides what he has to say inside the book, and the reader has to find it out. He has to unearth it, dig it up, and then find out the didactic elements. So it involves the craft of the writer in hiding this. So the sincerity of the author is not in making the didactic element explicit. Explicit opposite is implicit. It should be implied, not directly or straightforwardly explained to the reader. Then the ninth one, ideas are to be silently demonstrated or enacted in a work. Same thing, rather than explicitly expressed or stated. So, that's the same thing given in the eighth one. So nothing is explicitly stated, or it is implicitly stated. That means there are suggestions of it, and the reader, the reader with the the intelligent reader will be able to find it out. Now the 10th last one. The function of criticism is to interpret the text, to mediate between the reader and the text. So the reader himself is a critic. So on the one hand there is the text, and on the other hand there is the reader. If he is an average reader, a critic who knows the art of criticism should mediate and then help the reader to find out the meaning. Now, every reader is a critic. Every reader stands on a distinct platform on his own. I told you about a male, aged, then he belongs to some kind of religion, and all these shape his thinking, his perspective, and he finds out a meaning which is different from a meaning found out by a girl who belongs to another sect or another party. Understand that there's so much of differences there itself. So that's the tenets, the salient features described by Peter Barry. And now come to page 17. Now he sums up the common principles of theory. That also I have given in detail. But what he observes here, politics is pervasive. Language is constitutive. Truth is provisional. Meaning is contingent. Human nature is a myth. The common principles of the recent theories are: 1. Politics is pervasive. What do you mean by pervasive? Something which is present everywhere. I told you, almost all the problems in this world are political in nature. Gender discrimination is a political issue. Don't confuse with that political parties and the usual term politics. Then language is constitutive. And what is the view of language? The theorists say that the language is constitutive. Constitutive means they have the language has the power to organize, to establish anything. It is the primary importance is language in all these literary studies. So the importance given to language, that is not the language in the olden times, the new concepts given by Saussure and other linguists during this period. So it has the power to constitute, it has the power to organize, establish meanings. Then truth is provisional. Usually truth in the olden times is spoken of as the perfect truth, the ultimate truth, the absolute truth. These are the words used to define truth or not to define truth, but to relate truth. But what is provisional? Something which is temporary is provisional. That itself means that what I find as true may not be the case with another person. So truth is something relative, ആപേക്ഷികം. There is nothing like absolute truth. That's what theorists say. Meaning is contingent. Meaning happens by chance. It's something accidental. It's something attributed. It's something conditional. Or it is dependent. എങ്ങനെയാണ് മീനിങ് കണ്ടിൻജൻ്റ് ആവുന്നതിൽ സൊഷ്യൂറിയൻ ലാംഗ്വേജിൻ്റെ കുറച്ച് കാര്യങ്ങൾ പഠിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ മനസ്സിലാവുന്നുണ്ട്. There is nothing like an eternal meaning. I told you in the present day we follow more Saussurian concepts in the study of language. The relationship between word and meaning is not that solid. It is language is a slippery mode. That means meaning itself changes. When a person speaks something, then when the tone changes itself, the meaning changes. When it is spoken by another person, or the meaning is found out by the listener. You don't have the power over language. When you speak, you don't have the ultimate power. You don't think that language is in your control. What the other person makes out is the meaning. So everything is on a temporary basis. And human nature is a myth. I told you about essentialism. Man is made of essences. So human nature is a myth. Something unalterable. Liberal humanists say that human nature cannot be changed. A good person remains always a good person. That point. So it's a myth to believe in the unalterable human nature. So again, what I've read out these in the text because it is given as something important. Because in several areas you find the quotes by Peter Barry. So I think when you go through these, you will be able to gather some kind of an introduction about liberal humanism and the transition to theory. And I will take one more video. കുറച്ചൊരു എക്സാമ്പിൾസ് ഇൻസ്റ്റൻസസ് ഒരു ടെക്സ്റ്റ് വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ അത് നമുക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ട്രഡീഷണൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഇൻ്റർപ്രിട്ടേഷൻ എങ്ങനെയാണ്, പിന്നെ ഒരു തിയറി വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ എങ്ങനെയാണ് അത് വ്യത്യാസപ്പെടുന്നത്. That would be interesting. So I'll show you 2 or 3 examples and then we will wind up this module. So as usual എഴുതിയെടുക്കുക, പഠിക്കുക, എന്തെങ്കിലും സംശയങ്ങളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചോദിക്കുക. ഓക്കെ, താങ്ക് യു ആൾ.